even with virtual reality, you only get a very, very small inkling of what it is like, because the most important thing is the experience, is the feeling you get. And as you go into the higher dimensional levels, and I try to describe it in the book, the higher your consciousness rises through the different dimensions, the more you get the feeling of homecoming. And there's a very distinct feeling. You feel more and more secure. And there's a good measuring yard of telling you how close you are to your source consciousness. And as your consciousness expands and you rise higher, you feel more intensely the aspect of being at home. This homecoming aspect is really... I mean, lots of people had near-death experience. They very often talk about, I've been home, that's where I belong, this is the place where I go. And the predominant thing is the feeling of absolute security and safety, and that's very powerful. And then, of course, there's an underlying texture of joy wherever you go, and this joy sort of keeps you rooted constantly in a feeling of serenity, of peace, of beauty, and you're in a state of sort of enchantment, and and then the images. Even now, when I try to recall the pictures or the scenery which I visited, I find it very hard, because it's just not possible to materialize it in the way you experience it. And even when I've got clear pictures in my mind, but they are just cliches. They're just, sort of postage stamp size. But they're like, in my mind now, when I recall it, like walking through a landscape of paisley patterns, which are continuously evolving into new patterns. And as you walk along through this garden, this paradisical garden, through gates upon gates which sort of unfold, and everything becomes more beautiful, you cannot possibly imagine, how is that even possible, that such things exist, and on top of it, you have got this incredible feeling of security, of being at home, you're shrouded in this loving atmosphere, in this beautiful containment space, and yet everything is expansive and is unfolding in front of you. So these are very rare experiences, and I've come up with this video, which I've created, or this one of my first environments. I try to give people a feeling of what it's like, and the only way I can do that is by working together with a good friend of mine, Craig Pruse. He is a film composer, and he uses mantric sounds. He goes right into deep meditation and connects to via the mantras, and gets into the spiritual sphere where you literally hear the music, And there's a religious organization called Saint Mat. They are using the sound current to meditate, and this sound current takes them into the higher dimensional levels. Now the thing is, I called this particular video of the picture behind me is actually a sort of scene shot from that video. I called it Daswan Dwa, because I was trying to find a connection to something which other people have reported and experienced as well. And that was the only thing I came up with. That was from Saint Mat. They're sort of describing the different levels of reality, the different dimensions as they rise higher and higher, right into the God level. And one of these levels is one of these God levels, Daswan Dwa. And then they go even further. They say, okay, that is only the beginning of the higher states of consciousness, and so it goes on and on after that. Now, I can't make any claims at all. I mean, I'm too wrapped up in just a little bit I've seen and I've experienced, and I couldn't tell you whether that is actually corresponding to anything they describe in the scriptures. And their description are quite poor, because the metaphors they use are really quite childish in a way, because they say the streets are paved in gold, the fish are sort of encrusted in jewelry and things like that, you know. So they're just trying to find a way of describing this incredible beauty which is in abundance there, you know. And that's very difficult. So what I depicted is not a representation of what they are talking about. In any case, the dimensional levels are infinite. I mean, even if you go on the lower dimensional level of the astral level, they are infinite in themselves. You know, to go to the medium levels, they are infinite. You know, you have an incredible diversity, and so it goes on and on. And the higher your consciousness, the more your consciousness unfolds, the more diverse it becomes. So all I'm left with, when I try to represent something, is trying to get a feeling, an atmosphere. So in my pictures, what I do is I very often represent it with mist, you know, to describe the light of the region, because you cannot represent the light. You know, the light in itself has got infinite nuances, which you cannot really reproduce on the physical level. And also, for example, colors. For each color, which we, let's say, the color purple, which we may discriminate about sort of 10 or 20 or 30 shades of purple. There you can get a whole world made out of purples, and they are infinite. And the color purple, for example, would set a distinct experience, a distinct feeling tone, which would tell you what sort of kind of chakra perhaps you are connected with into this world. But when I say there's a world of purple, it's incredibly colorful. It's not just one color. As you tune into it, it becomes very, very diverse, you know. So it's almost, there are millions of shades, but it's the atmosphere of this purpleness which sets the tone of the experience. And then you go into another world, for example, that can be like a silver world. It feels silver, you know. On closer look, you think, oh, it's incredibly beautiful, silver in its purest form. And as you get accustomed to it, there are billions of shades of silver, which sets a feeling tone for a completely different world, a completely different dimension. So whatever I try to express is not even scratching the surface. So we have to throw our minds wide open and be open for, or be ready for, experiences which surpass anything we can possibly grasp in our limited, with our limited senses here on this level. The question is, how much nicer are these realms than the mid-astral level? All I want when I die is to be reunited with my loved ones and spend some time in a pleasant place making up for lost time. Okay, the next sentence is, why should I work to give up my sense of a separate self in order to enter the higher realms? Now, there's a big misunderstanding. People think when they go into higher dimensional levels, they lose something or they leave something behind. Okay, but it's the opposite. You gain something. You get closer to yourself and closer to your loved ones. So let me give you an example. Let's say you are in a lower dimensional, you're here on earth, you're with your loved one, with your wife or your husband, but you live in a very shabby place. You cannot pay the mortgage or the rent. You have barely enough to eat. Now, how much do you think you will appreciate your partnership? Probably not very much, because your state of consciousness is on a much lower level. Now, as we rise through the dimensional level, the joy of the togetherness increases, because you are no longer harassed by the circumstances which you had to endure on the lower level. So now that goes right up to the core state of our being, our core identity. It's then, let's say there's always the expression everybody knows about, marriages are made in heaven. Is this togetherness, this close bond between people, which lifts the state of consciousness and literally takes them into a place of joy, of love, and of beauty. So people who are in love, they're very close to these higher dimensional levels. So we can count on the fact that if we really truly love somebody, we will never get separated when we rise from the lower astral level to the higher, right up to our core state of being. Okay, the higher we rise, the closer we grow together, the more we appreciate each other, and the more intimate our relationship becomes. And so I hope that answers this question. So people think, oh, I mustn't go too high up, because I miss my wife or my husband who may be on the lower level. Or, this is not the case, because we can actually be on a higher level and still tune into a lower level. And what we bring then with us to this lower level, let's say our partner is being trapped because of some issues they have to work through, what we then bring to this lower level is an incredible energy, which will help the person. So whatever we try to imagine, we cannot, if love is at the root of our relationship, we cannot be separated, So that's just one point I want to make. Can I take my loved ones with me to these realms? Let's say my consciousness is expanded, I've left the astral level behind, I'm sort of no longer identified with the issues which kept me identified to the lower energy levels. And can I take my partner with me? Probably not, because everyone has to work through their own challenges, and there are lots of reasons why we are focused on a certain state of consciousness, which we have to work through, and we have to resolve it. We can get assistance from people, and we frequently get assistance when we really want it, or we may not want any help. We may want to do it our way. We may want to even experience certain aspects, certain environments, which are for other people not so pleasant, but for us personally, they're just what we need. So everybody tunes into their own kind of environment, their own state of consciousness, and mostly people are quite happy there. And even on the lower dimensional level, I discovered people actually are very difficult to move on, because they are so attached to their environment, to the it's very often when they get bored with their experience that they then find out they need to move on to a higher state. So, and also the other thing is, do people have relationships here? People have relationships on all kinds of levels, in every possible state of consciousness. Even people who are sort of on a very low level of consciousness. I mean, you can sometimes see couples who continuously argue, who continuously are at each other's throat, and they need each other and they want to be with each other to have the experience, and then when they are separated, they really, really pine for each other, because they're still addicted to the experience of being at each other's throat. So, I mean, you can have a relationship on any level.